that he's getting a little shy of people, this one, even though he warms up to them eventually. So I thought it might be a good time for him to come out. I know you can't see me. If you need to stand to see him, it's okay. Because his kind of attachment that he's outward to me right now will leave shortly, and I just am getting as much of it as I can until it goes away. You want to go say hi? You got him, Antoinette? Takoda! Takoda! Where'd you go, big boy?
Daddy.
Hi, Liz. Come on. Hi, Takoda. Come on. Okay. Good boy. The name of my talk this morning is called So It Goes. Yes, I know. And it's a line in a song that our new friend Joey Fulco is going to sing for us, and they wrote it. And it's about someone who has passed. And I'm going to talk a lot about that today. So it seems to be the need to talk about grief has been coming up a lot lately. And the reason that I chose Takoda is that how we got him safely was that our shadow had a soft tissue sarcoma. And we had done everything that we could do for her, and we were losing her. And we had found a treatment at Colorado State University where we could take her and she could be treated, but we didn't have the money to go. We had to get from here to Colorado State University, and then we, of course, had an estimate of what it would cost. So we had been given an estimate of the price that it was going to cost in order to go to Colorado State University and treat her. And we didn't have it. And then February 14th, which was Valentine's Day night. Come on in, you guys. I think there's some more chairs over here. We got a call from the sanctuary where these guys come from. And there were black puppies at the time. And I believe that Henry, who is the Native American that has these guys and cares for them, thought that Shadow had passed, and that's why he was calling to say that there was a new puppy. There were puppies. And you should have seen the look on Paul's face. Puppies. There's nothing that gets him brighter or his eyes start to sparkle than to mention puppies to him. And I had a moment of, like my mother grabbed my body and took hold of it like this and went, well, do you think that's the smartest thing to do? And I like looked at myself and went, what am I talking about? What am I talking about? I knew already that I did not want to live a life where I was waiting to see if she was going to die to see if we were going to live. And that's where we were. That's where we were every single day, wondering about if Shadow was going to make it or not. And every single moment. And then we get this call. And I remember through my studies that the wolves live for the pack. They live for the puppies that come. It gives them a sense of purpose. It realigns them. And if you think about that, it's not just in the wolf family, in the human family, and in those families where they raise their young. We live for that. We live for those moments. There's nothing more precious than, for those of you who saw Wakan just 10 weeks ago. To watch this thing that's going to turn into this magnificence that's already magnificent inherently. And to watch it grow and watch it live and see what its possibilities are. That's what we hear. That's what inspires us and gets us going. Right? So we headed out to get a puppy. We really did not know that there were black puppies at the time, but when we saw them, we understood that Henry was looking to see if we wanted to replace Shadow, which is not what we were intending to do. They're confirming. So now, one thing that Paul said, when you're trying to manage things and control things, Paul said, no males. We're only going to get a female. We had 2 females already, Shadow and Alaska. No males because no possibility of puppies. I'm like, okay. So we went up there, and you know, my teaching has taught me that the best outcome, you know what I mean, is what's possible. So I said a prayer about, you know, claiming that the highest good for our pack, and if there's a new addition to our pack family, it would be the perfect member, right? So we get there, and the only female members are black, little black puppies. And that was just, Paul looked at me and said, we're going to replace Shadow, and I said no. So the only other possibility we had was Takoda. And Takoda at the time was this gray little ugly thing with orange around his head. He was like this little gray mush ball with this fiery orange thing, stuff around his head. And Henry said, started to hand him to me and said, this is your puppy. And I said, is he male or female? He goes, he's male. And I said, don't let me touch him. So then I went around the corner and I met Takoda's father. Pitch black, tall, big boy. I took 3 to 4 steps back involuntarily. And then Paul said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, there aren't any wolves here for us right now. And he goes, really? And then Henry goes, well, there's one. And then I said, but it's a male. And you said no males. And he goes, well, let's go look. And I stood there by Takoda's father, and I said, no. He said, you said no males. He goes, let's go look. He's walking away, and I go, are you sure? Because I'm not touching it unless we can take it. Hi, sweetheart. Good boy. I know. So how do you touch it and then let it go? Do you know? How do you touch it and then let it go? Which then moves back to, you know what I mean? Anyone who's lost something. Or in the past. You know what I mean? Once you've touched it, how do you let it go? That's what I'm going to talk about. So of course they put him in my arms and he snuggled in and he came home with us and the rest is history. But I will say at the beginning of this talk, which is going to be difficult, and I have a hard time this week even thinking about it, because I do not want to do dishonor to anyone's memory. And it's a scary thing to talk about grief. It's a scary thing to talk about the people that have passed. And I'm going to do my best. But I'm starting with Takoda because you cannot mistake the life that's in him. And just so that you know that Shadow lived a whole nother 2 years. And I know it's because she lived to raise him. Because 2 days after we got him at 15 days old, we were in the truck going to Colorado State University anyway, even though we didn't have the money. And it ended up costing $1,800 less than they said it was. So we went home with $0 in our pocket, but we were able to pay that. So we move in faith, you know what I mean? Or we move in fear. And these are the choices we get when our hearts are breaking. Do you understand? Our hearts are breaking at the time you're trying to make the best decision possible. And how do you do that? How do you do that? I don't have many answers for you today, but I know it's a question that people have. And I looked up a lot of things because I thought maybe there was some wisdom in the way people and cultures all over the world handle grief. I didn't find anything much encouraging, by the way. There's some superstitions that just create even more pain. And I don't want to go into those, but I will go into some of the things that have happened in my life. And I already see that and know that have happened in your lives for the people that I know. And for Joey, who's going to sing the song that she wrote with your dad, right? So Leo Tolstoy says, only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract the grief that has. So I'm going to start with our meditative song first, and I want you to know that the song that Joey's going to sing is called Other Hands. And as we sing Hands of Grace, and you listen to Hands of Grace, just know that that's what I'm talking about today. So wherever you are, whatever you're feeling, know that it's okay. Know that the chair that you're sitting in is holding you, that you cannot fall. And that Mother Earth is holding that chair. So you can let go. Here's what I know. As sure as I am standing here and I see the faces in this room, I know that there's an intelligence, a creative force, a power in the universe. And we are made of such stuff that in each and every one of us, down to the marrow of our bones, we are created from this source, this powerful magnificence that is eternal and infinite. And I claim for each and every one of you that your heart's desire is moving you through this life, if you will only listen. And that my heart's desire is something that I ask to know each and every moment when I don't know. And I understand that I am in the hands of grace, in other hands, moving me through this life. And I want to honor today, and I claim for each and every one of you, that for everyone who has come before us, and everyone who is here now, and for those who are yet to come, that there is a preciousness to this life, that we are precious, and that we live on in each other, and that we leave a legacy, no matter how long we were here. I bless this knowing, and I say thank you in advance for all the good that I know is coming, all the good that is here today, and all the good that is yet to come. I release it knowing that it is true, that the laws of attraction, that the laws of love, the laws of the universe itself are holding you in the hands of grace and conspiring in your favor at all times, despite appearances to the contrary. And I say, and so it is, you can say it with me, whatever that solidifies in that to you, aho is the Native American, amen, namaste. I'm going to ask Joey to come and sing this song now that I've talked about it. She's a new friend to us. I've never met her until today. So Takoda is going to let her sing.
Maybe there's a reason to Guess we'll never really know or understand why you go to be in other hands. I've heard so many stories, though we've never met. The way he talks about you, it's like you never left. It's the little things that get him by, but he takes it day by day. And he may not always realize you never went away. Ain't it so, ain't it so? Things will always never go the way you planned, how you saw it in the end. So it goes, so it goes. Guess we'll never really know or understand why you go to be in other hands. Well, maybe there's a reason it didn't go your way. So live your life believing you'll make it out someday. Ain't it so, ain't it so? Things will always never go the way you planned, or how you saw it in the end. So it goes, so it goes. Guess we'll never really know or understand why you go to be in other hands.
You know, I made a list of the grieving times of my life that I can remember. You know what I mean? That where someone passed. And then I saw on each hand, because I have time removed, the blessings in it and the, you know what I mean, the pain of it. So I had an uncle that was about 10 years older than me, and so when I was 14, he was found hanging from a tree. And he was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and my parents' family was living in Pennsylvania, in Johnstown. And we lived in Houston. And we were on a family trip to go see my parents at the time. Otherwise, I hadn't seen them since I was 3. So it was this synchronistic moment to arrive the day that they got the news and that they were preparing to bury him. And he was always, they called him Squink. He was my Uncle Squink because he had a funny eye, you know, the kind of eye that kind of goes in, so he had this nickname all his life. And my mother talked bad about him because this was 1970 and he was a hippie, blah, 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 you know. Who was just never going to get his life together, and, you know, like all this talk about my Uncle Squink, right? And of course, as soon as she found out that he had passed, she lamented giving him that nickname. She says, I was the one who gave him that nickname. I was the one who he had to live with that name because I gave it to him when he was a kid. But I had only heard, you know, this pounding into me about the hippie guy that was my uncle that was never, ever going to do anything right with his life. And so we were at my grandparents' house, and they were preparing, and all of a sudden this caravan of people, of my uncle's friends, showed up. There were maybe 50 people in their 20s, And that was before there were legal limits to how many people could ride in a car. And they just piled in and they slept out in my grandparents' backyard. And I remember helping my grandfather make scrambled eggs for them in the morning. And I was astounded that a person that I heard was this amazing mess of a person who was never going to get his life together. I had so many friends that would come and do what they did and to honor him. I was floored. So I was really shy. I had maybe one friend at a time as I was growing up. To watch somebody who was supposed to be this person I'm not supposed to respect have so many people ride for him and honor him. That was my first experience of losing someone that, you know what I mean, even wasn't close to me. I didn't know him. I hadn't seen him since I was 3. And now I'm 14 and I have this awareness. You know, and my father didn't go to the funeral. He stayed behind with my little brother who was 8 years younger, saying that it was too young for my father, for my little brother to go. Even though there were hundreds of people at the house, because in the, you know, Pennsylvania Dutch, you know, there's all kinds of people making sure that everybody gets fed when they come home. You know, the community gathering together, and that's a good custom. But my father didn't go, and even at 14, I knew it wasn't because he wasn't going because of my brother. I knew he wasn't going because he couldn't. And so at the funeral, I watched my mother have to bury her brother without respect. And there are things like that you can't take back. You know what I'm saying? My father could not face it, so he could not be there for my mother, for her brother. And I was young enough to watch this dynamic go on at this funeral of a person I didn't know. But I did see, past all the customs and all the blackness, you know what I mean? Everybody was dressed in black, all the blackness, I saw that his life had some significance and had some power to it. No matter what my mother thought of how he lived it, he had a significant impact and footprint that he left before he went. No one knows why he did what he did. There was speculation they were partying, that he fell and hit his head. He was sitting on a wall and fell and hit his head, and maybe the pain, something drove him to do this. But he basically was staying with someone and hung himself in the tree with friends. And leaving that kind of legacy behind too. Very, very painful for people. And when I was in high school, I knew this girl only because her name was Andrea, and she was in the debate team and I was in the drama department. We kind of knew of each other because we would do these competitions on the weekends with each other. And her boyfriend, who I had done a play with called Antigone, was shot and killed by his brother at 17. His brother's 19-year-old brother shot and killed his parents, shot and killed him, shot the family dog, threw the gun in the yard, and then went home to wait for the police to come and arrest him. And I used to watch her, because she was in class with me, grieve while no one paid attention. You know what I mean? And, you know, substitute teachers would go, does anybody know, did you guys know that, you know what I mean, wanting to gossip and I mean, seriously, watching her in astounding, you know, measure, you know what I mean, people wanting to know the scoop. And it was 3 months after he had been shot and killed that she lived down the street from me. We were at an event where we did this competition, so she just jumped back into life. Well, what else was she to do? I'm sure her parents just sent her to school. You know, so she's going to school every single day as though what happened in her life did not happen. And I drove her home. And she started crying. And and she said, please, if you can't take me home yet. Because I can't let my parents see me cry. So here's a 17-year-old girl who she knew as the love of her life. with no one to talk to. William Shakespeare says this. Let me find it. Oy, oy, oy. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak knits up the o'erwrought heart and bids it to break. You cannot hide this stuff inside. And here she is at 17, and I'm not even her friend. So I drove around, we drove around the neighborhood, and just drove and let her cry. And she says, you know, my friends, they're just telling me it's been 3 months. You have to get over it. Like, there's a time. There are cultures, by the way, that I read about preparing for this talk, that there's a time that it's supposed to be over for you. Like, what? What? It amazes me. I did a little movie, and we're talking. I was in my 40s. I did this little movie, and it aired on the Sci-Fi Channel. And Andrea, who I'd not seen or spoken to since high school, recognized my voice. Came running into the other room, saw that it was me, and now we had internet, so she found me and called me when I was living in New York. I was astounded. She remembered my voice. After, we were not friends. I don't have that distinctive voice, you know. I'm not like, you know what I mean? Who's got, you know, one of those voices? You know, what an English person, you know, Anthony Hopkins, that you can recognize when you speak. I still to this day know it's because I drove her around and let her cry. I didn't know what I was doing. I just did what she asked me to do. And happy to do it. And appalled that she was having pressure to get over something that I could not even imagine. You know, I was divorced when I was 24, not by my choice. And people would ask me, how are you? How is that? How are you doing? And I'd say, you know, it's killing me. It nearly killed me. It took me a long time to recover, so much so that it took me 30 years. 30 years to the year to agree to marry Paul. From that time to that time. And I remember people at the time telling me, you know, you're going to find out one day it's the best thing that ever happened to you. And I was like, I started to repeat it to people until finally some wise person that I was, you know, getting singing lessons from said, no, it's the worst thing that ever happened to you, it's just not the last. But I have to tell you, you know that thing that I tell you in your chairs, like let it go. It was the first time I had actually exhaled. Because I could hear that truth. Because somebody acknowledged that truth. And look at me today. That was 1981. So much for 3 months, you have to be over it. Not in my experience. Mostly what I find is most people don't know what to say because they haven't dealt with their own grief. And we know if you don't deal with your own grief, and the psychology, you know what I mean, the stages of grief are very, very important. Even though nobody tells you how to go through those stages. And today, mostly, they just throw drugs at it. So you just don't have to. And then you no longer know who you are. He's setting boundaries with the puppy. But I will tell you the most inappropriate that I was. I had worked with a co-worker. His name was Edmund, and he had a heart condition. He was not supposed to do physical labor. And, you know, waiting tables is physical labor, if anybody's never done it. Carrying these big trays is physical labor, and he was about the size of a minute, you know what I mean? He weighed maybe about 85 pounds due to his condition. But his father wanted him to do something in his life that he was not willing to do. And so we got news one day that he didn't make it. He was 25 years old. The heart gave out. Because his father would not get who he was. So he was doing a job, because his father cut him off and wouldn't let him go to the school he wanted to go to. So here he is doing a job with physical labor, which is the last thing that he could do, which he was told would kill him, and it did. And it was a Buddhist funeral. And I had never seen anything like it. I mean, I had barely even heard the word Buddha at the time. So I went to this place in Chinatown by myself to honor my friend Edmund, my coworker. And it was this party with this chanting and all these parties. They were all dressed in beautiful colors, which the last time I had been to a funeral was the black funeral. And then his father meeting and greeting people with such joy and just putting this fruit, it was mostly fruit, they put fruit on the casket. But he was having a great time in my estimation. It was breaking my heart. I was so angry with him, I could do nothing but laugh. Laughed out loud for this entire service, with people turning around and looking at me like, what? What are you doing? And get out of my anger, because I couldn't express my anger, my true feelings. I just laughed in total disbelief that this man that I believe caused his son's death was having this great time sending him off into the next. And I could do nothing but laugh. It is one of the biggest shames of my life. Because I couldn't help it. Because I couldn't do anything else with my anger at him at the moment. My grandfather passed away, and the last time I had seen him, they were living in Pennsylvania and I was in California, and he said, "When's the next time I'm going to see you, Colette?" And I said, "I don't know." And I looked at him and he looked back at me right in my eyes. And he said, "Maybe in heaven, huh?" And I said, "Maybe." It was Christmas time and he passed away in February. It was around Valentine's Day. What happens around Valentine's Day? And I couldn't go. I couldn't pack up my life and get to, I didn't have the money to get to a funeral and to go back and do that. But I went to the bank and I was on my way to work. I got out of my car, went in and did whatever I needed to do. What do you, you want to chew on my cord? No. I went into the bank, I came out, there was a single red rose laying by my car door. I knew at that moment, and of course it physically was dropped there by somebody who had it or didn't have it for Valentine's Day, but I knew that was my grandfather. I knew that it dropped by my car door and was left for me by him. That I know. That is unmistakable to me. And Christopher George, is anybody old enough to remember Christopher George from Rat Patrol? Yes. He was a friend of mine. And he had, when you're filming Rat Patrol, apparently they had an accident on set. And you know the Jeeps, that have those bars? It flipped over and they were in the sand, fortunately, and it landed, one of those bars landed on top of him, on his chest. And he was in his 20s, early 30s at the time. Yeah, I know. Easy. Anyway, in the movie industry, in the television industry, you have to be insurable. That's why they don't let a lot of stars do their own stunts. So he was uninsurable if people knew the real state of his heart at the time. And so he created his own production companies. And it broke his heart, not just crushing his heart, it broke his heart because he was at the top of his career and he could not work in the career that he loved. It took him another 25 years, this is when I knew him, was when he was trying to get over the grief, to get past what happened to him, to get to the next level. And his bodyguard at the time, who is now a very good friend of mine too, was a Vietnam vet who was in special ops and was dropped outside of Hanoi as a sniper and an assassination team and never expected to survive. But he did. Come on. So he told his story to Chris, and Chris sat down and with some writers and they wrote this script, and he got a 3-picture deal. He was going to shoot in the Philippines. This is in the 80s. And he was going to include all of us in this production and to get it going, and he'd finally gotten his life back, and we were sitting and waiting for him, and he was late, and we were wondering what was happening to him. He was 52 years old. And then we were told that he passed away that night. So you go, you know, really, I'm in my 20s going, you know, that why? A thing you cannot answer. The why. He was just getting his life back. And then his heart gives out finally. The thing that he had just overcome is now giving out. I'm talking here, this is my experience, and you guys all have your own. I can't imagine your own and what stories it comes from. But I was at his funeral, and he had the open casket, and everybody was going up to see him, and I couldn't go. But it was the first time that I knew that he wasn't there because I could feel him in the room. It was this huge Greek Orthodox church, and he was there, but he was not in he was in that room. And he is always with me, along with my grandfather, because anything that ever would happen to me from that moment on, between the two of them, do you know what I mean? I would get this overwhelming feeling the way I did in that big, huge church with all that stained glass, and that I have that memory again. So when I'm in trouble, oh my gosh, they're there. This powerful feeling that I get, no matter what's going on with me. When I was young, I had a best friend. And she had, I'm going to run over, I'm looking at the clock, but Colette is her name, my goddaughter. And at 23, she was headed home from a party, and she had a little fender bender for what we can imagine. And someone had stopped and was helping her, but her foot was caught. And they just about had her out, apparently. And she had this woman's hand. And someone was speeding down in a big SUV into the truck. And the woman had to let go of her, and it T-boned her into the railing and basically killed her. She did not recover from that. She was 23 years old. Colette. And of course I flew to her mother. I'd known her since I was 7 and she was 8. And I don't know why her family thought it was going to be a big surprise to send me. I arrived at the top of the stairs. They were in the basement at the time, this like area where they were hanging out. And she saw me at the top of the stairs, and they didn't tell her I was coming. So she had this moment, and I climbed down the stairs, and she grabbed me, and we fell on the floor together. And we rolled on the floor, and she held on to me with dear life. And I could do nothing except let her do that. And I watched my friend, who I knew as a child, walk through this experience with such grace and such amazement, but with such love in the room. And I can't imagine. I could only hold her. You know what I mean? I could only hold her through her experience. That was it. But I could not imagine. And then, you know, the whys to that. I was with my ex-boyfriend's mother. And I'm labeling these things because, not because I'm saying bad things about them, but culturally we have issues about this stuff. You know, she was Jewish. And we met this woman who talked about losing her daughter. Her daughter died on the day of her birth. And I'm in my head going, how do you do that? And my boyfriend's mother says to her, well, it's really hard to believe or understand why God would do that. And she looked at that lady, and the lady looked at her and said, God did that? You know what I mean? It's like, and then I didn't even know where to go with that. I just was amazed at these, you know, that thing about God's will, you know? I'm sorry, I don't believe there's a God out there picking and choosing, you know, and putting and doing. And Judgment Day, what is that? You know, we'll all know on Judgment Day. What is that? How do I read that into shadow? Do you know what I mean? What judgment does shadow have in heaven and in passing? You know, I was in New York in 9/11. And one of the reasons that I moved back here is because the city was in grief. And it was worse the first year anniversary, because there's those people that say, now you can celebrate the first, you know what I mean, you can celebrate the lives of people. A year later, with all those images and reliving it again, it threw the entire city into mourning once again. And it hit hard. So much so that I even believe that the weather was affected. That year, after the year anniversary, mostly what I experienced the first year was everybody was happy to be alive, and they were grateful for their lives and grateful for the people that survived and their families. And so there was this whoosh of gratitude. And then we had to relive it again, and then it was like living in a big bruise. Not only that, the weather that year, 2002, there was maybe 60 days of sunshine the entire year. And that's what made me move back to California. I needed light in a city that did not know how to read. Katy Perry says, you said move on. Well, where am I to go? What's Katy Perry? And I think that that's the question we ask. Do you know what I mean? If you want a spiritual answer to this spiritual event in our lives, which I do believe is spiritual also. Where do I go from here? Grief can destroy you or it can focus you. The answer to the mystery of existence is the love you shared sometimes so imperfectly. And when the loss wakes you to a deeper beauty of it, to the sanctity of it, you can't get off your knees for a long time. You're driven to your knees not by the weight of the loss, but by gratitude for what preceded the loss. And the ache is always there. Time limit. But one day, not the emptiness. Because to nurture the emptiness, to take solace in it, is to disrespect the gift of life. You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you never completely get over the loss. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up. And you come through, it's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly. That still hurts when the weather gets cold, but you learn to dance with a limp. There's a woman who wrote a book called Dying to Be Me. It was funny, I had this quote when I first met Tommy here. I believe that the greatest truths of the universe don't lie outside in the study of the stars and the planets. They lie deep within us in the magnificence of our heart, mind, and soul. Until we understand what is within, we cannot understand what is without. She had a diagnosis of cancer, and she wrote about how she felt and how she was approaching it and how she lived through it. Her name is Anita Morjani. I detach myself from preconceived outcomes and trust that all is well. Being myself allows the wholeness of my unique magnificence to draw me into those directions most unique magnificent. Being myself allows the wholeness of my unique magnificence to draw me in those directions most beneficial to me and all others. That's what we're doing here. This is really the only thing I have to do. And within that framework, everything that is truly mine comes into my life. Effortlessly. In the most magical and unexpected ways imaginable. Takoda, Wakan, shadow, fall. Demonstrating every day the power and love of who I truly am. So, you know, where do you go? You remember who you are. I think that that's the message in that. You remember who you are. That gives you the faith to know who they were. And remember that always. There is a man, he's a neurosurgeon, who basically had what they call a near-death experience. From what I've read, it sounds like they died. So there's no near-death there. They died. And he came out and he wrote a book. His name is Eben Alexander, called Proof of Heaven. And I'm just going to finish with what he said. He says a lot of things that are really wonderful. So if you're hurting and grieving about the loss of a loved one, and where to go, it's a great book to start with. Our eternal spiritual self is more real than anything we perceive in the physical realm, and has a divine connection to the infinite love of the Creator. Love is, without a doubt, the basis of everything. Not some abstract, hard-to-fathom kind of love, but the day-to-day kind that everyone knows. That kind of love that we feel when we look at our spouse and our children, or even our animals. In its purest and most powerful form, the love is not jealous or selfish, but unconditional. This is the reality of realities, the incomprehensibly glorious truth of truths that lives and breathes at the core of everything that exists or will ever exist. And no remotely accurate understanding of who and what we are can be achieved by anyone who does not know it and embody it in all of their actions. Now, he was told that his experience was a hallucination, and as a neurosurgeon, this was his answer to it. Hallucinogens affect the neocortex, and my neocortex wasn't available to be affected. So, I suppose that this talk could go on because I have more of those kind of moments in my life to express to you, but I do know there are going to be more. And so this message to me, do you know what I mean? Is my message to you is my message to me. But when they say why and what happens, that last stuff of somebody who's actually passed and come back and talked about it, I trust that. I do trust that. I have a hard time trusting other things like God's will or Judgment Day or will know. I have an ex-boyfriend and I went to his father's funeral and there was a young priest there. It was a Catholic service. And he started the homily by saying, and the whole service by saying, the reason we die is because Adam and Eve sinned. Thank God I was in the back of the pew. I doubled over in pain for him and his family. If they were really listening, do you know what I mean? It's like, I think sometimes you go to church and you listen to these things that are said and they just go in you. Oh my goodness. I believe that life is eternal. And that this is only one aspect of it. And it's precious and holy. And I know, just like I know that Christopher George is hanging out with me at all times as my protector, I know that shadow brought us to this place. I know that these entities, these souls still live through us, in us, around us. They are not gone. And that we only know minuscule, this much, about the meaning of life itself. other than I do believe the message is that your heart's desire is telling you how to live a divine purpose here. And so I'm going to bring this divine voice back up. And she's going to sing a song that ends this section. And it's Jolene to kind of lift our spirits again. So come on up. And you can stand up.
You ready, Sir Doctor? Jolene, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Jolene, 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 please don't take him even though you can. Your beauty is beyond compare with flaming locks of auburn hair and ivory skin and eyes of emerald green. Your smile is like a breath of spring, your voice is soft like summer rain, and I cannot be with you, Jolene. Well, he talks about you in his sleep, and there's nothing I can do to keep from crying when he calls your name, Jolene. Jolene, 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 well, I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Jolene, 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 please don't take him just because you can. Now you can have your choice of men, but I could never love again. He's the only one for me, Jolene. Well, I had to have this talk with you. My happiness depends on you and whatever you decide to do, Jolene. Jolene, 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 well, I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Jolene, 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 please don't take him just because you can. Please don't take him just because you can. Please don't take him even though you can.
The prayer feathers that you have in your hands, just so that you understand what those are, the Native Americans believe that the leather that's holding it grounding you, and that the prayers, the feather tastes like. So that's the purpose of the prayer feather, and if it's comforting to you to take it home with you, then please do. If you would like to just leave it here so that we have more for the next service, then that's really acceptable too. Whoops! I just wanted to let you know we do not pass a basket here, but we open our hearts to any monetary gift that you would like to share with us and can afford. There's some jars that are on either side of the room where it says for the wolves. It all goes to helping care for them and to build what we're doing here. So we really appreciate it and say thank you in advance for your generosity. There are some handmade items here that are handmade and donated for us to raise money. So if you want to check it out, and be happy to help you with that. Natalia's singing too. All right, we're almost there. We have a burden basket. For those of you who have been here before, the Native Americans believe that you're not to carry more burdens than you can bear. So if you brought and came here with any burdens, you can go write them down, put them in the basket. I will release them for you and burn them later. They also put their burden basket when it was empty outside their dwellings to remind them not to bring their burdens into their sacred place, which is their dwelling and their home. This is kind of our version of it, but please do that. And if you have something or someone to be grateful for, we have our joy jar on the other opposite end. It's got a little black wolf on it, and it's in front of the, Paul's got it there. Yeah. And we're gonna go see the wolves. We have a 2 o'clock visit, but we will go and see and meet them. Please stay for refreshments, and I think Paul, saging would be really great today. I know there's a lot of people, but it would be good. Anyway, the Native Americans believed that the sage was a purification, a cleansing of the spirit and soul. So I always end with this song, and it has some sign language to it. You guys are gonna help me teach it, right? So before we sing it, we do this, right? You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. Ready, girls? What do? We tell Paul to do what?
Hit it, Paul. Hit it.